everything is all for the same purpose. I have the same goal as what was it, McDonald's back in the day had on their marquee, serve over 1 billion people, right? That's my goal. That's my purpose in life.
Welcome, everyone, to Seek, Go, Create. Tim Winders here, your host, coming to you as always, passenger seat of the RV Theo. Today, the conversation is going to revolve around some things that I love, and I know that as listeners, you do too. First thing is, I got a guy that played basketball at the highest levels. I think he's about 6'8" or something like that, maybe taller. I don't know. That's what I read. And yeah, 6'8". And so we got basketball. He's just come out with a new book called Filtering that we're going to discuss. He has an interesting background growing up in the Philly area and different background than me growing up in the burbs of Atlanta. We're going to discuss that. Y'all know I like to dig into people that have different perspectives than I do. So we're going to have fun with that. So a lot of things that we will be covering on today's episode. So hang tight just a second. I want to remind you of one quick thing, that we have so many resources over at our website at seekgocreate.com, at seekgocreate.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, Facebook, listening on podcast platform, make sure you go over there. And the big thing that I want you to do, scroll down to the bottom of the main page, put in your best email address, because about once a week ish, I put together a lessons learned, some things I've learned from our recent episodes. And it's a short email that I share with everybody just to keep you up to date on all things that are happening with Seek, Go, Create. So give us your best email if you haven't done that already, and check out seekgocreate.com. Today on Seek, Go, Create, I've got Joel Green with us, and he's an author, CEO of Pro Level Training, National Nike Sports Camp Director, and former pro basketball player and a professional speaker. Joel Green is with us. Joel, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Tim, thanks so much for having me on, man, and congrats on year 3 as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a big deal, I think, in podcasting, to kind of come in and have 3 years. A lot of people do a few episodes and just disappear. So we're excited. I think we're about 175 to 180 episodes now with cool, awesome people like you that join us here. Hey, Joel, first thing I want to do, I gave just kind of an abbreviated intro, but let's just kind of say that we meet somewhere, and my 5'11" looks up at your 6'8", and I say, hey, Joel, or we're sitting by each other on a plane, which I hope you've got more leg room than I usually do when I'm on an airplane. Right. But, we just kind of say, hey, man, it's good to see you. What do you do? What do you typically answer people when they ask you that?
I make an impact on purpose. That's something that it covers a good amount of all of what I do, to be honest. I'm in a number of different industries. You've named them, as far as being a speaker, now being an author, being a national director for Nike Sports Camps, being a CEO of a company. Everything is all for the same purpose. I have the same goal as what was it, McDonald's back in the day had on their marquee, serve over 1 billion people, right? That's my goal. That's my purpose in life, is to hit that mark, and that's what I'm about. So every industry that I'm a part of is just about being intentional with making an impact.
Yeah. And the word impact is such a cool word. So I'm going to dig a little bit. We're going to kind of go deep right out of the gate here, and then we're going to kind of back up and get some background and some stuff like that. But how do you know if you've made an impact? What are the clues that you see? Because I have some similar mission, and sometimes I'm like, man, we're doing stuff, we're making it. And then sometimes I look around the world and go, man, I really wonder about that. How do you know? How does Joel know if you're making an impact?
Well, it starts with my intent to begin with. I can objectively, figure out if what I'm about to do is, somewhat impactful, influential, informative, things like that. So it begins there, to where I have a level of comfort to where, I say, okay, I'm going to try to make an impact with this thing I'm about to do. And just like you mentioned, beyond that, you don't know. all the time. You know, it's not like you always get feedback on what you do. You don't always see reviews or things like that. But, you know, I like to dig. I like to find and find out what people thought about what I did, about my service. And that helps me. If I only get one, I know that if I serve that to hundreds of people, more people than just that one person actually felt that way. And that's how I'm able to gauge different things. And I really try to seek feedback, criticisms, things like that. And, you know, it fulfills me enough to make me do it again.
Yeah, and that's a cool answer because you kind of gave a little bit of both sides of the spectrum. You know, sometimes when we're out doing things like we're on these social medias, we're doing what we're doing right now, we're recording something, trying to share something that will inspire and maybe help people. And then now you've just written this book, Filtering, that we're going to do a deeper dive later in the episode. But you know, I just recently put a novel out, and I realize I'm a pretty confident guy. My guess is you've got a pretty decent level of confidence with all that you've done. I started realizing as I was getting close to releasing the book that I was about to open myself up for a different level of possible impact, but also criticism that I've never done. I mean, these two fingers typed out a lot of words. Did you experience any of that as you were kind of getting closer to doing something new and different, which is releasing a book?
Absolutely. I remember even hesitating to send my finalized manuscript to the editor, right? I was like, oh, wait a second. This is somebody's about to read my book, you know. And again, it's their job to critique, you know, but it still felt like, wow, I'm about to really open myself up to, you know, have somebody really break down and criticize what I put my heart into. And it was a different feeling that I had just to release it. Say, okay, I went over this thing 3 or 4 times myself, fully edited myself. I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna give it to the professional who does this. And yeah, I remember feeling that even before it was officially, you know, completed and released to the public.
Yeah, well, I want to talk a lot more about the book shortly,
Mhm.
and I believe it's a real powerful. I've gone through about a third of it over the last few days on my Kindle. I think it says I'm about 36%, something like that. But I could tell, man, you threw a lot of your heart into it and a lot of things trying to bless people that read it. And so we'll get to that in just a moment. But I got to do this first because one of the things we do here, Joel, is we really like to unpack or dig in, whatever you want to say, why people are who they are today. And we don't back off from the tough stuff, which is one of the things. I think the tagline on your book is extract strength from struggle. So I want to fine tune and really go into that word struggle for a moment here. And we don't glorify it, but we learn from it. And so you grew up, and you shared a good bit in the book, but I want us to talk about it here. You grew up on in the Philadelphia area, which there's a lot of people that Philadelphia is an awesome place. The thing being from the South that I always remember is the Philadelphia Eagles fans threw batteries at Santa Claus
Oh
one football
man.
game. So that's like, and we're the city of brotherly love. Tell us about your
I
growing up,
know.
and maybe redeem Philadelphia for me. That
Look, first off, I can't say I'm surprised, man. You know, it's unfortunate, but you know, I was just at an Eagles game recently, and that's you know that's the nature of our fans, man. But I love it. That's we're super passionate about you know our sports, just about everything that honestly comes through and from Philly. You know, if you know anybody else from Philly, you know we talk about it at the drop of a dime. We brag about it as if it's its own state and it's only a city. You know, so that's Philly in a nutshell, man. But you know, for me coming up, it was honestly it was a blessing. Like it was tough, no question. Just being literally, you know, within the inner city, growing up in North Philadelphia to be exact, it was dangerous in many areas. You know, I saw it firsthand. I was around it, you know, as far as just the violence, the drugs, you know, this was during the crack era, you know, so this was just it wasn't an ideal time period, you know, for people to be out publicly. I'll say that. But you know, it helped me to develop a callous to danger, to just difficulty, man. It helped me to develop awareness in regards to, okay, don't go down that area, don't go that way because XYZ may happen. So my common sense was developed so early because my antennas went up at a young age. I was like, okay, I know my surroundings. I can walk into a new block or a new neighborhood or a room, and I assessed it. This is before the age of 10. I had to look around just to make sure there was no quote unquote dangerous people here. So, me being 10 feet away from a shooting myself when I was 6 years old, thinking I was going to get shot, like the kid who was shot that I witnessed. It was a difficult time, man. But, as a child, you have short-term memory. So I was able to just continue to move forward and press forward and distract myself. And, fortunately, that's what began to happen. I began to distract myself with basketball and just distract myself a little bit more with basketball and a little bit more it was on purpose. I knew what I was trying to escape. And, the more I did it, the more it took me out of my neighborhood, which was a good thing.
Yeah. The thing, Joel, and I kind of brought this up when we got started, and it's just something, I don't know if it's the age I'm at now and I'm trying to understand the world a little bit more, but all right, this is going to get serious a little bit here. Everything in our media, the world out there, it really attempts to kind of drive a wedge between people.
Mhm.
So let's go ahead and have a mature conversation here. I grew up in a lily white area in a suburb of Atlanta in the
Mhm.
70s. And so there's just perspectives. Now we didn't have a lot of money. It's not like, we were wealthy or
Right,
anything,
right.
but we were like middle class. Both my parents were teachers. I didn't realize we were as poor as we were until
Okay.
later, you know, but,
That's
uh,
funny.
but listen, very different perspective than you grew in, and everything wants to pit
Mhm.
us against each other. And
Sure.
and so I think I'd love for us to maybe have a little bit of a mature dialogue here and ask you something to the effect of, what does someone like me need to know about how you grew up that I might not have a clue about? Just educate me a little bit, and I'm open to it. I mean, I can tell we're both, neither one of us have
Mhm.
a victim mindset, so it's not as if we're going,
Right.
poor pitiful me. But talk to us about what I should know.
Well, number one, I appreciate that question because I really feel that the racism that may exist, sexism, just all these isms out there
Yeah.
is because of ignorance. In my opinion, it's a lack of understanding, it's a lack of knowledge of the other side that we may be hating or feeling ill about or toward. It's just literally lack of knowledge, and that just allows us to have fear and hate creep in, and that's what we spew out. So I appreciate you even asking that question. For myself, there's a whole lot of people like me, not just talking about African American, but those growing up, impoverished to where we lacked. And I think what is often looked down upon about those growing up in the inner city is the outcome and the effect as opposed to the causes, that causes those effects. We're very desperate growing up. We didn't have much of anything. And that desperation is what leads to so much violence, stealing, because we're desperate. We don't have. So we're just trying to find a way to get to survive. And, people don't really realize that looking in from the outside that, man, they're actually desperate. They're just literally trying to survive. They want to make it to tomorrow. And the unfortunate thing too, man, that's what actually turns us against each other. We see the black on black violence growing up that I've seen too many times. Again, that's what I've witnessed multiple times. And it's because the desperation, this crabs in a barrel mentality. We just want to make it to tomorrow and hopefully make it out of this neighborhood. And it's a tough thing when not a lot of resources are given from the outside inward, even educationally, and that was a tough part too, to where, again, I know this even more so now. I have family that's been in education. My mom was in education for over 20 years. I had the inner city education, and I also had a suburban education my last year of high school. I transferred to a school that was just outside of Philly. It was saddening to see the difference of what was intentionally given versus what was intentionally kept away, you know, in the city. And I literally saw how, again, this is, you know, my opinion, but I experienced it, and how that the amount of electives and true vocations and areas and walk of life that follows high school, I saw how much those things were given to the suburbs. And none of that was given to us in the city. Like none of it. It's like, man, no wonder most of us are going to go work at McDonald's as opposed to becoming a CEO or a manager somewhere else. It's like we were literally being groomed to work at the post office, which is nothing wrong with that, but to work just locally and not really get outside of our neighborhoods, not go away to college and start our family somewhere else besides where we grew up. It was so many things I began to recognize. It's like, man, that's why I do what I do now as far as speaking, because I've been able to see multiple sides of life. So it's like my empathy has gone through the roof towards my own, where I come from, because it's like I literally know what's being withheld from them. And it's I hope that those on the outside of that environment can at least understand, like, there's literally things being held back from us to become our best selves.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's probably so many layers to that that we could continue diving into. I mean, obviously there's the political, there's this the
Mm.
baked in. I'll use a word that's somewhat inflammatory, systemic, you know,
Sure.
it's a word that's thrown around and different people on different sides of the equation. I think the thing that just really bothers me the most, Joel, is that the culture wants you and I'll just, I'll make it personal.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
culture really wants you and I to be pitted against each other and to think that one has something that they're taking. And I just want to convey, I want to bust that up because everything
Mhm.
spiritually,
Good.
yeah, let the political folks keep doing what they're doing, because I think they're going to keep going down that path.
Yeah.
And I'm not really for either one of them. Whatever, we've only got two choices
Mhm.
here in the US. I think both of them have their flaws, but if we could do anything here just to kind of open up the conversation, I'm excited about it. The thing I want to kind of go a little bit into, though, is I like for anyone, I mean, the way we grew up is the way we grew up, period. We can't change it. And one might argue that, you know, depending on your spiritual belief, that we're planted or created where we grew up for purpose, for reason,
Mhm.
for more divine purposes. So you grew up in that environment. Give
Mhm.
me a couple of pros and then a couple of cons that you're still dealing with, maybe to kind of overcome, before we kind of go into, I want to kind of talk some basketball here in just a minute,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
talk about some pros and cons about how you grew up in the environment you were in.
Well, you know, it was definitely some pros, no question, man. Like I said, it helped to develop my common sense, which is so important. You know, when it comes to this world, you don't want to be taken advantage of. And I learned how to not be taken advantage of very, very early. I learned what, you know, just I learned what criminal looks like. And it sounds crazy to say, but even by the age of 7 or 8 years old, I knew what criminal looked like. I knew, okay, don't, if someone tries to invite you over to their car, do not go. You know, it was beyond just stranger danger. It was like, nope, I could tell exactly what's going on here, a block away. I'm not going anywhere near it. And I just wasn't oblivious to much. I had a level of awareness before the age of 10 that was beyond that of a typical child. And I'm saying that for myself and others in my environment, because we had to, we had to survive. So that was definitely a pro as far as developing our awareness. A pro was, it also made me tougher. I'll be honest. It had me to develop a spirit of you know, a fight that I needed later on in life. But I was able to help, you know, someone develop it early on. And I was able to just experience difficulty. Difficulty was a blessing for me, you know, as a young child. I mean, I didn't see it all the time during that period of time. But as I got older and I had to deal with, you know, death of loved ones or just defeat, honestly, loss, you know, whether it be in sport or just in life, or I failed at this, I failed at that. I always had the perspective of, oh, well, I went through worse before. You know, and that perspective has carried me through so many things, because I've grown up in an abandoned house like I did, or being around the violence. in my opinion, things could just be worse. So if I'm losing a job, I'm like, well, things could be worse. If I came up short on a venture, things could be worse. So that's been a major pro. A con, I would say, is that, and I've escaped this, but a con was just that, one side was good, one side was bad, right? Again, you begin touching on how they just kind of they want things to be black and white, just being honest with you. And they want to pit two people against each other. And I grew up with that thought. I'll be honest with you. I'm like, man, we're here because, white people are trying to keep it, and that was my
do you have a little bit of
mindset.
do you have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder at all because of that may have been a con, but also may have kind of drove you?
Mhm. Oh, it was a big chip. Absolutely.
Oh,
It was a big chip on my shoulder. For me, it wasn't a little crumb. It was a whole chip. And for me, it definitely drove me because I knew what I saw. I knew what I saw. And all I saw was African Americans just like literally walking around. You can tell when they were drugged up, up the street from, you can just tell, and I knew this at a young age. I can tell that person over there sitting on the pavement against that wall, they just did some type of drugs. Like they're just leaning over, They didn't always look poor, like homeless, like wearing, multiple pairs of pants. You could just tell they just did something, and they'll probably be up in an hour or so, and they'll just be walking somewhere else, and they'll go about their business. But I saw that, and everybody looked like me. And I'm like, anytime I saw someone that was not like me or white, they look happy on TV, and it just, that's what was represented, and I'm like, man, what's going on with this? So for me, it became a chip to escape what I was around, and to honestly, I'll be perfectly transparent, to get what I saw the other side have, right? So I said, okay, I want that, I want to actually live in a house that doesn't have graffiti on the walls. I want to have, grass outside my house, so it was just like small things that chip turned into motivation for me. And then at the same time, as I was working to get, I guess you can say, to the other side of life, I began seeing like, okay, there's not just one side going through this. It's so much as far as programming, conditioning that takes place. There is a high level of reality, with this though, but I still begin to just realize that there's a lot of propaganda that takes place. There's a whole lot of things commercially that takes place. Again, you mentioned systemic earlier. It's things that are politically just put in place to keep people in a certain level of mindset and mentality. Again, it drove me to do what I do now, as far as just trying to instill a level of belief into people. Say, look, this might be a con for you because of where you're growing up. Turn it into a pro.
yeah, that's good. Any spiritual background or anything growing up that your family, or someone in the family you kind of had as a bit of a, I don't know, rock or something where you go, man, Auntie Sue, she goes to church, she's doing stuff, or anything like that you could have as an anchor along the way?
Well, I'm a PK, man. I'm the youngest of four, and both my parents are ministers.
I didn't
So,
see that. Was
so
that, do you get that later in the book? Because, I wasn't picking up on that
yeah,
vibe. Usually you could get that
yeah,
vibe pretty early on that there's a preacher's kid involved here. I didn't get that.
yep. Yeah, you'll see it in there. It's so both my parents are ministers, man, and that honestly, that's what helped me to escape. It was what they were intentionally instilling in us, all four of us, as far as there is another side. You can. It was so a whole lot of that, and it was that level of faith that just gave us a vision beyond where we were. And honestly, it helped to diffuse the hate that society was putting in us. Every time we stepped outside of the house, there was a whole lot of hate toward the other side. We stepped in the house, it was like, all right, look, it's not about hate. Focus on what you need to do instead of focusing on them or anybody else you feel is holding you back. That way you can propel yourself to the best of your ability. And that's what they did for us. We would watch documentaries, we would have conversations about it, we would have Bible study in the evenings on our own, and just talk and share testimonies, just to making sure we're still grateful for things. And That right there, I mean, I do it with my son now.
Yeah, that's good. All right, I'm gonna shift, but it's related because you mentioned that you had all these influences, obviously, biblical ministry, documentaries, and all that kind of stuff. But somewhere along the way, you saw the movie Teen Wolf. So
Right.
people going, where are we going with this? Well, I was
That's funny.
reading one of your bios or something like that, and I saw a clip from Teen Wolf recently.
Mhm.
And let me just tell you, the basketball scenes, that was not Michael J. Fox. I do not think that was
Not at all.
somebody. So what
Not
was,
at
I mean,
all.
so I know I went heavy and then light real quick, but somewhere along the way, basketball came into your life. So tell us a little bit more about that. And I think that movie had something to do with it or something.
Yeah, that movie, it was a big influence, believe it or not. I guess it was around like 1988 or so when I saw it. I was just about 3 years old, and I saw this movie with this wolf playing basketball, and it was like, I was just fascinated, like, man, there's animals playing basketball. And I
And
just
he
remember the
dominated
sound of the ball bouncing.
that wolf dominated too. He dominated the
He was
basketball
he
court.
he was better than Michael Jordan. I mean, look, that wolf was amazing. I'm like, man, Michael J. Fox, he sucked when he was himself, but when he turned into that wolf, I was like, wow, I would have my nerve hoop and I would do the same type windmill dunks and everything. And it just was so cool to where I'm like, okay, I want to do that, right? I wanted to play basketball and dunk like the wolf. And I just began playing basketball a whole lot on my little nerve hoop. I remember I got one Christmas, and I never looked back, man. I said I'm going to do what I saw, on that movie, and just win games and be picked up in the end after I win the game and stuff like that. And it actually spurred my love for basketball. That corny, cheesy movie that I still love. It kind of started me off in the game.
So you started playing basketball. Some people will say, and boy, if this is a myth, just kind of correct me on this, but that a lot of people look at the way out of the way you grew up is primarily athletics. That you see a number of people do that. Now, you somewhere along the way grew from 5'11" to 6'3" to 6'8", which obviously helped as far as basketball goes. But was that like your way out? Was it that chip on your shoulder? I'm going to do this. Or was it something that basketball was like, okay, I really do love it because of that wolf playing basketball? What led you into basketball? Because obviously you probably have an athletic, you probably could have played some other sports. I guess my question is athletics the way out of the situations we've discussed? And then why was it basketball for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not a myth. That's a reality. There's not a whole lot, again, that's offered to those in the inner city that say, here's your way out. Here's your ticket off of your block or your neighborhood that you're growing up in right now. And again, in other areas, there's a whole lot of tickets. There's a whole lot of exit doors. There's a whole lot of, ways out, to where you have options, whether it be college, just different options, inheritance, and just ways. And just not inheritance financially, but inheritance of knowledge, of wisdom, of investments and things like that. So we're like, oh, okay, I got another way out. We didn't get a lot of that. So we knew it would either be athletics, by way of basketball or football. Those were the two primary. A few of us would make it out by way of baseball. We kind of did our thing in and out of the city a little bit, kind of on the outskirts. But basketball, football, or music. And that was just the thing. It's like, either entertainment or athletics. Business business really wasn't a consideration. It's not for a ton of kids, but it wasn't like I even heard the word investment or stock market or anything like that until I was older. I love those things now, but it wasn't given down to me or my siblings or my friends from our parents. They didn't know about it. As far as like in depth. So yeah, basketball for me, man, obviously, Teen Wolf, I fell in love with the movie and it just was fun to play and do what I saw them do on the movie. But one of my older brothers, he was a basketball player. My father, he played basketball coming up. So they kept me in the game, kept me involved in the game. And once I began to see where it could take me, I'm like, this is my ticket to college. You know, I knew, you know, we didn't have a whole lot of money for my parents to be sending all of us to college and stuff like that. So it was intentional for me to earn a scholarship so that my parents didn't have to pay, you know. So that drove me. I'm like, all right, cool. I could see a couple of my friends getting scholarship offers. I'm like, okay, I want that too. I saw, you know, guys going to Temple, you know, back home in Philly, and I'm like, oh man, I can do that. So it became a huge motivating factor for me to, again, make it out. And once I was able to start playing AAU basketball, and that took us into traveling and things like that, I said, I have to make it out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up something because I was sitting here thinking to myself, I literally was thinking another Michael J. Fox reference. There was this TV show called Family Ties where
Oh,
he played
absolutely. Yeah.
Alex P. Keaton, and he wore a tie all the time, and he was talking about business and all this stuff he was doing. That was actually me growing up. I was
Wow.
that guy that was always talking business. So it's interesting the contrast. Now, I will say
Mhm.
this, if I could have done anything, I would have loved to have played basketball, but I'm about 5'11". I'm obviously a white guy, which doesn't preclude anything. However, I'm slow, can't really jump very well. And as much as I worked on
Oh
my
man.
shot, couldn't really overcome a lot of stuff. So, at what, I mean, so I guess the contrast is there. I mean, I was thinking business. I mean, I had my first business when I
Mhm.
was at Georgia Tech, shortly
Wow.
after I started school there. So it is interesting the paradigms that are different there.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize you were pretty good at basketball? Was there there was a point in time where you go, huh, this could be my ticket, or I'm better than a lot of the folks around me, or I'm pretty good. I might be able to make it playing basketball. When was that?
I was about 10 years old, you know, and
10.
so
Wow.
yeah, pretty early. That's when I got my first, if I'm not mistaken, my first MVP trophy I played in the West Philadelphia Biddy Basketball League, the West Philadelphia YMCA, the Biddy Basketball League. And actually, I was 11 years old when that happened, but I knew even before that point, I was like the best player in the league. And it's a whole story. I won't tell it, but you know, I remember when I was 10 years old, I knew I was MVP of the league, and I didn't get the trophy. And it made me. I worked so hard at that age to where I'm like, whoa, I can be the best player in this area at least. You know, I didn't know about the whole city. I didn't care for the whole city. I was just 10. It was all about who I saw every day. Like if I'm the best player amongst them, I feel like a champ. So that happened around 10 or 11 years old, and I'm like, okay, I could see myself going to a cool high school doing this, and beyond, you know, going to college. And I wasn't thinking a whole lot about college at that time, but I knew of different high schools that were like big on basketball. You know, I had guys that came before me that I would hear my older brothers talk about, like Rasheed Wallace and other guys that were playing in North Carolina and the NBA and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, I want to do that. So, you know.
So what's interesting about it, earlier you mentioned that your your environment that you grew up in, the pros of it was that it created an awareness. I think you were able to see things broader than just maybe what was right in front of you, and could pick up on when things were a challenge or danger or different things like that. And you also talked about toughness was one of the pros. A lot of people, we don't want to dive into the technical aspects of basketball, but there's a lot of people that are fast, tall, and can
Mhm,
jump. But what most people don't really recognize is the awareness of being able to know what nine other people on a court are doing, and
mhm.
the up and down of the court. Tell me a little bit about how the awareness from the tough upbringing, maybe, or maybe it didn't, if it doesn't, fine, translated into when all of a sudden Joel is on the court and there's a lot going on, maybe up in the stands, but then there's also nine other guys, four on your team, five on the other, that you kind of have to see more than one person and all. Does that make sense? Did that question make sense at all?
Oh, big time. It definitely translates. There's no question. I mean, you have to learn how to watch your back on the street. You know what I mean? And it's not like you're constantly attacked, but you do have a constant feeling of possible attack. Me and my brother were just talking about it on the phone. He's over in Germany, but so when we talk, we really talk in depth. And we were talking just about a week ago, like how we used to be on alert, just walking up the street to the store, to the corner store. We was looking over our shoulder, And I never forget when I learned how to drive, he told me, my dad taught me how to drive. When I started driving with him every once in a while, I still had my permit or something like that. He will always tell me when we stop at a light, give yourself like 4 feet of space in between you and the car in front of you so that you can have room to escape in case anything happens. And it's crazy. I still do that. I was like 18 to 17, 18 at the time. But that's how we grew up with that level of alertness. And it definitely translates onto the court because you have your friends back on the street or in school, things like that. It's the same thing on the court. Like you have your teammates back. If you see something looming, you're there to help them out as far as even a potential, somebody setting a screen on them. You're calling it out because you see it ahead of time. You don't want them to run right into it. It's the small things like that that it definitely translate over into, and just an overall drive. Like again, being on the street, just you're going hard just to, hopefully you're going hard to escape it. That's not the case for everybody, unfortunately. But in my case, I can attest to definitely going hard to escape it. It helped me to go hard on the court as well, just to win, to compete. I'm a competitor, so that was the best part for me, was to not fear competing. I didn't fear competing at all. It was like if I had playing against a big name, I'm like, all right, cool. Things can be worse. It could be a lot worse than this. This is my time to shine now. I can steal their name.
Yeah. And I want, you go into a lot more of some things you did with basketball and things like that. And I would love to keep having that conversation, but I'm going to recommend people get the book because you cover some more things there. I'm going to ask a similar question that I asked about your growing up years. What are some pros and some cons about your career in basketball and sports? So, a few pros that's like, okay, I've carried this on into my life beyond that. And then maybe some cons. It's like, okay, I'm still trying to overcome this that I learned or something. I don't know what it might be, but
Mhm.
give a couple of those before we kind of keep moving on and start diving into the book a little bit more.
Well, it's so many pros, man. So there's too many, to be honest. Yeah, I learned so much just from playing basketball, especially at a professional level. Again, I still have the same or similar schedule of sorts. As far as my morning routine. I used to wake up at like 4:30, before 4:15, 4:30, start my day then. Now I'm happy to wake up at 5:15. It's a nice break. And I get up, I pray, spend my mindful time for a good 20, 25 minutes, read the Bible. After that, eat a small breakfast, and then I work out. This is all before 7 a.m. And so those are the type of things I did as an athlete, and it just helped me to feel good. Like not just mentally, I mean, not just physically, but mentally as well, physiologically, it just, mind, body, everything felt good. I felt like I can attack my day. So I do that now in business. I do it as a father, to where now I wake my son up, 7 o'clock. He eats breakfast. We work out some mornings, and I know what it does for him. It gives him confidence. Like, man, I did something that my classmates didn't even do today, and it feels good to do. So that's been a major pro that I've carried over from sports, is just that mentality and schedule and discipline. Another major pro, I have to mention this, is just the ability to go beyond what I feel like doing. That's something I definitely learned in sports, to where it's like, okay, you have a mandated 10 reps of something, do 16. That's my mentality now. If somebody tells me I got 12, nope, I got about 18 of them. And that's just, for me, it's about overachieving. I love to overachieve on purpose. People give overachieving a bad rap. They'll even call, oh, he's overachieving. Yep, I am. And I'm doing it on purpose. And guess what? You're recognizing me for it. You know what I mean? And that's what people need to realize. Like, overachieving is a good thing. You know what I mean? You don't have to do the norm. You don't have to fit in. You don't have to just do the dogmatic stuff that's already in place. I love overachieving. I got that from sports for sure. So that's a major pro. And a con, I would say, it's tough. It's tough to think of some cons.
Let me hit you with one and you tell me yay or nay. One
Gotcha.
of the things within our culture that's challenging is when our identity starts being wrapped around what we do. And I've talked to some folks that were athletes or maybe in a little bit more of a celebrity or type situation. And at times people like that struggle when they step away from it. You're wrapped up. I mean, I think you're still involved with the sports world. We'll talk about your businesses just a moment here, but what was it like when you realized maybe you were not going to be competing at that competitive level, something that you've been working for since it sounds like you were 10 years old, or whenever you saw that movie Teen Wolf and all, and I know you still work out and things, but it is different when all of a sudden you're not competing at, that level. What was it like for you with your identity when all of a sudden you realize, you know what, this phase of my life may be over?
I'm so glad you pointed that out, because that was a con. That was a con for
Mm.
me, no question. I went through an identity crisis.
Ah.
I experienced depression and anxiety for the first time. So again, I'm glad you highlighted that, because I wasn't even thinking about that side of things. But when I stopped, I was trying to transition into business, and I had to get, quote unquote, regular job, and just having to work in a call center after being cheered for by thousands of people, and being yelled at on the phone by people about their portfolios and bank accounts and things like that. It was tough. Just trying to transition and build up my own company. But it was a really difficult time, because you are, again, we know what we're called in college as far as student athletes and high school student athletes. But the reality is we're athletic students. I'm just be honest. I'm just being blatant about it. It's sports first when it comes to so many of the coaches, even for the kids. The political spiel is to, hey, how's the grades doing? They'll ask that first because they're supposed to. But the truth of the matter is, the most important thing is the sports. That's what got us to the school, right?
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't have given us the full scholarship if it wasn't for how we performed on the court. And if we didn't perform on the court, we may not have been able to go to school any longer if we didn't uphold the requirements of that scholarship. So when it came down to it, it was sports first. So you're conditioned to be an athlete, and I don't want to say minimize, but education ends up being minimal a little bit, and not prioritized. So you just so athlete first. You're like, man, by the time you step outside of it, you're like, man, I know I'm more than an athlete, but in what way?
And we
I experienced that.
And we want to put people, I mean, we do this, and this is one of the things that I'm very critical of our culture. We put athletes, celebrities high up on pedestals. And I think it's to their detriment. I mean, even smaller type colleges and schools have 40, 50-year-old men that are idolizing 18, 19, 20-year-old kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that it's kind of tough. I mean, I never had this issue. I mean, it's kind of like, not poor pitiful me, but it's not like, but I see it definitely at the big universities. I think it's even at the smaller level that, you got this 45-year-old guy saying this 18-year-old kid is so awesome. They're fawning over him, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's got to be tough to kind of move up through that, depending on background. It sounds like you had a good, solid parental background, but we know that some don't. And then all of a sudden, when that's over, then what? That's got to be a challenge, I think.
It's tough. I've had conversations with so many of my friends that, began in recent years, getting out of the game, just because it's their time, just ready to retire, ready to start things at a new age. That at the time they may be about 35 years old, and it's like, that's old in sports. You know what I mean? It's like, so all of a sudden it's like, hey Jay, man, we've seen you do this. How did you go about it? Because I stepped away earlier than most. I really wanted to try this business stuff out. I got my business license during one of my seasons in Europe, so I knew I would step away a little bit sooner. My curiosity it led me there. And so I've had multiple conversations with buddies of mine, people that I didn't even know, that would reach out to me and say, hey man, we see you killing it here, over here, you're doing really well. How are you doing it? How did you transition into it? And so I never leave out the fact that it wasn't as clear cut as it may have seemed from the outside. Outside looking in, it may look that way. I struggled to get to where I am. But again, I embrace the struggle. I always find that sweet spot within the struggle, and I use it. And but it wasn't easy. Again, going through depression, questioning who I am as a person. I never did that before. I was always very secure, never insecure. I'm like, man, who am I? You know, my marriage began to suffer. It was bad because I'm like, I was this athlete, you know, promoted and just, you know, always touted and talked about. Then all of a sudden, nobody was talking anymore. And seemingly nobody cared, right? And that was a tough thing to deal with, but I had to care for myself more. So it was a good teaching point for me to not have to be validated by everybody else and begin validating myself.
Yeah, well, doing new stuff stretches us. I mean, we can get comfortable wherever we are. So you transitioned into some business. Tell us just briefly about the businesses and what's going on with those. And then I want to make sure I've got plenty of time to, you know, a few minutes here to talk about the book before we wrap. So tell us about your businesses.
Well, I mean, I had probably about 4 or 5 businesses that no one would ever know about, really. But you know, just ones that didn't
Oh,
work
one of
out.
those. Those were the valuable ones, though. You learned.
Exactly. Look, I learned a whole lot, man. I'll be honest. I really did learn a whole lot. But you know, the one that I could tell I had a true passion for, and it wasn't just a great idea, which those other ones were great ideas, but they weren't my passion, and that's why they didn't last. But the business that I've had for over a decade is my company, Pro Level Training, and that was just me literally showing people what I learned, you know, as a pro, but giving it to the youth, you know, at the same level that I learned it, but obviously in moderation. You know, if it's an 11-year-old kid that I'm working with, you know, I'm not going to have the same intensity. Like, all right, you wake up at 4:30, you maybe, you know, but you know, that's what I begin delivering to different kids. And Nike Sports Camps, they've caught wind, and we partnered up. And again, this was about 10 or 11 years ago that happened. And, you know, we just began growing. My company began growing around the country. We began to help to grow the Nike camps around the country. You know, my company, we grew into about close to 20 states across America now, and almost 40 cities. And we just, you know, just kept spreading making our influence and impact as many places as we can. And just, you know, we cover a lot of different sports, man. And it's a passion of mine. I'm really intentional about making sure that not just the skills are being developed, but the mindsets of these kids are being developed. It's basketball, lacrosse, football, soccer, whatever sport we're handling. That's a sneaky vehicle just to get into these kids' heads, man. It's just like, we want to make sure they're going to grow up and be amazing individuals. It's not just playing amazing at their sport. So, I mean, that's my business in a nutshell, man. It's a major focus of us to really develop not just the bodies and the skills of these kids, but the mind and the mindsets as well.
Yeah, well, so at some point, and this is always a fascinating question for me because I did similar, and we get to talk to a lot of people that do this. At some point, Joel rolled out of bed, or you were working out, or you were spending time in prayer or something, and you got this interesting idea that you were going to write a book. Which what's interesting, a lot of people say they want to write a book, but then actually writing the book is like, there's very few people that seem to cross over. I guess maybe more people than we would say. So what provoked that? Why write a book? I mean, you're doing well, you got, you know, life's going well, and then you have to sit down or work with a team or whatever to put all these words on paper and to get something different out in the world. Why?
Well, I began writing the book while I was going through some struggles, man. Again, during that moment of finding myself, you can say, you know, as far as who I truly am, what I'm capable of beyond just the game of basketball, you know, on the court. And was, again, going through marital struggles at the time. It was a tough period for me. I just began venting, as most would, but you know, journaling in essence. And I had this Word document where I would just, for myself, discuss different topics. I would put the word perseverance, and I would just I would start typing about perseverance, you know, and I would relate it back to my life, and I would think of a story that I had to persevere, and I would just put it all in this Word document. All of a sudden I wrote 1,000 words. And I'll just leave it there, right? This started back in 2014, you know, about 7 years ago or close to it. And I just kept doing that. And, you know, I would write about something else, you know, perspective. And I would just write about it. How's my perspective different than others? And I would just I wrote 2,000 words. And I just had this Word document, man, that had like 10, 15,000 words in it. And I said, this is going to be a book. And I was already I'm a speaker as well. So I was already on stage during the same time discussing verbally these same topics and mentioning some of these same points that I would write about. And I said, okay, I'm gonna call this book Filtering. This was in 2016, just to fast forward a little bit. And I said, okay, all right, I'm gonna have a book one day, right? And people have been telling me for a while I need to have a book. And I'm like, I'm not a writer, but I've been writing, for a little bit already, just behind the scenes. And so I have the title for this book. I'm like, all right, let me keep contributing to it. I just never took it serious to actually make this thing into an actual book, man. And it wasn't until 2019 until something happened. And again, you've seen the beginning of the books where I was like, I got to get serious about it. I got serious about it. And I actually put myself on a schedule, which I never did before. I made writing a part of my daily schedule. The moment I did that, it literally became easy for me. It was just like a part of what I did. And I'm so glad I did that, because now it's less than an intimidating thing to do another book, because all I know, I just got to schedule it. But that was, I knew I had to as well, man. I was reading a whole lot. I was reading like 9 books every 3 weeks, and I had to regurgitate this stuff in some form or fashion. So I just began writing and contributing toward my book, man, and it finally happened.
I love the thought of you adding it into your schedule, because I think many times a lot of people, probably people listening in, think that we're going to just manifest this book, 30, 40, 50, 70,000 words, just because we think we've got a book in us. That's kind of the quote unquote a lot of people have.
Right.
But there's work involved, just like we talked about work with, basketball and business and things like that. And that work is a different muscle than just about anything else I've ever done. I mean, it's challenging.
Agreed.
So here's the big question I love to ask authors, especially people that have come from like where you have. What did you learn about yourself during the book writing process? Because I'm wondering at times if God doesn't say, I'm going to have Joel and Tim write a book, and yeah, they're going to sell copies and it's going to be awesome. It's going to have impact, but it's really more about them than it is the process. What'd you learn about yourself?
I learned a lot, man. Just by way of reflection, just that just reflecting so much back on my life. It helped me to appreciate things like I never have before. I mean it. Like, as I begin to think about different stories and things that I did overcome in ways that I never thought about, I'm like, whoa. It made me more grateful. I never felt like I was an ungrateful person. But there were many times, I'll be honest, I'm writing, I'm tearing up while I'm writing, sometimes I'm laughing while I'm writing, but it just made me grateful and appreciate life like I never had before, man, to where I appreciate people. I'll be honest, it helped me to appreciate people even more, because again, I definitely began writing this book for myself. It was a way of ventilation. It was therapy for me. But I can tell I began speaking to others and writing for others as I continued writing the book. And when I went back to do edits, I'm like, nope, I got to talk to them now on this part instead of just for myself. And it just made me, again, I've never been a selfish person, but less, selfish. And it just made me more empathetic toward other people. And I just think of others more, man. So I would say it put me in a very grateful and selfless place putting this book together.
Yeah. How old's your son? You mentioned your son.
He's 9. He's 9 years old.
9. Was he, I don't want to say involved with the process or anything, but is he kind of aware? I mean, it sounds like he's younger, so he may or may not be aware of your athletics and all that you did. I mean, you may have shared some of that with, but I mean, as a book came out, what was his involvement? I mean, he kind of like, oh yeah, dad wrote a book or something. What was his response? Because a lot of people say books are legacy type items. So what about that? What about your son?
Well, I mean, he played a major role in it, man. Because again, when I got serious about it, he was about 6 going on 7, right? And again, 2019, and I was teaching him how to read during this time. Obviously, he could read a little bit at the time, a few vocab words, some spelling words, but really trying to teach him how to read paragraphs and things like that. So he knows I'm a big reader too. Like I love to read and just taking information. I love to learn. So I'm like, all right, look, man, daddy's writing a book. He knew what I was doing in the mornings, like before he even woke up. I would tell him. Sometimes I would even read portions to him. He would come stand behind me while I'm sitting at the desk. He's like, oh, what you doing? Being a little curious kid. And I would tell him, I just wrote this part right here, and I'll read it to him. He's like, oh, that's cool. His walk off. Like it's not a big deal to him that daddy's writing a book. He's just like, oh, he's just doing something else. But yeah, I mean, he played a major part in it, man. Me having him to just read during that time was a big motivating factor for me. Because I told him I'm writing this book, and he would also see me reading these books, and I'll put him on reading challenges. I gave myself a reading challenge, during the same time period of reading 30 books in 30 weeks. This is while I was writing my book too. So, I read 31 books in 29 weeks. This was like early in the pandemic. And I put him on not a challenge like that, but I just told him, okay, let's try to get through a book a week. Let's see if we can do that. And we were able to do a few, do that once or twice. But he played a huge motivating factor for me, man. Outside of him just being my son and trying to create something, like you said, for legacy's sake. Me looking at him, I mean it too, man. I'm not trying to sound sappy, but me just literally looking at him, seeing him play a video game, and he don't know when I'm looking at him, is motivating for me. I'm like, I love him just growing, and whatever way I can contribute to his growth, whether it be me writing this book and him saying, wow, daddy wrote a whole book, that feels good to me. You know what I mean? Like that alone said, wow, he has a book. He brags about it, he brags about my athletics. He knows all about my background as far as, basketball goes. He knows that I ran track. He knows that I played football for like a hot second. So I share all that stuff with my son, man. And it really pushes me.
Yeah, it's good because I saw a lot of that bleeding out of the pages, even though I was reading on a Kindle, but I saw it on the pages as I was reading through it. The title is kind of fascinating to me. Filtering, how to or extract strength from struggle. Those are big words there, but the word filtering, I must admit, I was kind of like going, okay, what does this mean here? So tell us about the title. Where'd that come from? What is the meaning, and what is all that about?
Well, I'm an abstract guy, man. I love abstract art. I just, love abstractions, period. So even looking at the cover of the book, you're probably like, what's going on with his face? Like what's taking place there?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's exactly what I wanted for people to wonder. Like, okay, they see my face kind of disappearing, or is it coming together? I wanted people to draw their own perspective of the cover, of even the title, by but by the time they actually begin reading the book, they'll understand it by the end. But filtering in itself, man, just as with anything else that you filter, you try your best to pull in the good and leave behind the bad, whether you're filtering an air duct or, water, things like that. But I came up with this method for myself just to filter my circumstances, my emotions, so that I can not just dismiss these things that are here to actually improve me. My anger, the sadness, the happiness, all these emotions that I experience from day to day. I can't just look at these things as a bad thing as we always have, as far as anger. It gets a bad rap. Sadness even gets a bad rap so many times. Crying for men, it gets a bad rap. And it's like, I need to lean into these things more and see what I can draw from them to actually make me better, as opposed to just being angry and moving on from what I was angry about. Why was I angry about it? Question it, lean into it, and say, okay, now I understand why that triggered me. I'm not gonna let it trigger me next time, because now I have an understanding because I leaned into it. And that's what the filtering process does. It helps you to break everything down, to really assess it, brainstorm about it, and say, you know what? That's what I was supposed to get from this situation. And now that situation won't keep coming back again and again and again, as life so often will do for us. Just to learn one lesson, it will put us on a cycle just to finally learn that lesson. Once we learn it, we get to move on from that situation. Almost like a video game. Like, you don't move on to the next level until you complete that objective. And that's what filtering is, man. It really just helps people to overcome things while they're going through it. You don't have to wait on hindsight to give you those answers. You can do it. You can figure those things out in a moment.
Sure. When we started, Joel, I asked you what you do. And you mentioned that with, I might not be wording it correctly, but you wanted to have impact on people. You wanted to have impact, and you were intentional about having impact. What's the impact that you desire people to have that get this book, read a portion of it, read the whole thing, whatever? I mean, sometimes we don't know, but like in your quiet time, maybe in prayer time, and you're, talking to the Lord and asking, I really want blank to happen when somebody reads this book. What is that?
I want people to open their hearts and their minds to other viewpoints, to other perspectives. And I mean it. That's a huge thing for me. I mean, I said it earlier, as far as the isms that exist, whether it be racism, sexism, or the thousands of other isms out there. It's because it's a very closed-minded perspective, right? We're only seeing things from our one subjective point of view, and we're not objective in any way. It's like we refuse to step out of our own shoes to see things from another angle. And again, with filtering, again, you get into this brainstorming phase to where you start to objectively see things as if it's not even your own situation. In essence, becoming your own therapist, you begin to see things, you begin to see yourself as your friends may see you, as your parents or those close to your spouse may see you. That's a really important thing, to not just be so close-minded to where you only see things from your own lens. And that's my prayer, my hope, my desire is for people to really open their hearts, open their minds to other perspectives, man. It'll only make the world better, not just themselves, but I promise you, everything around you will make you better. And that's definitely my hope from this book.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about that is the theme of a lot of what we do here. Your book is driving that point home. And truthfully, Joel, conversations like this, I believe, have that type of impact. I'm hopeful that it does. So, and we could keep going, but where can people find you or the book, or where do you want people to connect with you? All those will be down in the notes. We've got extensive notes that we'll include, but just give people verbally where you want them to go if they want to connect with you. And then I've got one more question for you.
Cool. You can connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram at J Green PLT. That's JAY Green PLT. I love engagement. So I mean, those that knows me, if you send me a DM, a message of any sort, asking me a question, you'll hear right back from me. I love that interaction right there. I'm on Facebook, Joel Green Official. So again, you can find me on social media or through my website, joelbgreen.com. And you can find the book on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble if you prefer that website. But again, it's there for you. I'll be honest with you. It's there for you. But I love feedback. I love criticism. So I welcome, reviews and things like that. That way I can really see how it's affecting other people. And I really wanted to make an impact on you guys.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to connect with more people. I think that's one of the things we're missing in the world today. People are kind of hanging out with their own tribes or people, and we need to kind of start connecting with others. Hey, Joel, we are Seek, Go, Create. Those are the three words that we use as our title. And I'm going to give you one word, one of those. They're all, you could probably come up with stuff, but which one word means more to you right now today than the other two, and why?
I would say seek. Seek because I'm a very curious person, right? And it's that curiosity that has led me and still leading me to a lot of great things. I'm super, super curious. And I push my son to be super curious, about just the world and what his capabilities are and what he can create and what he can draw when we're sitting down drawing and coloring. So for me, it would definitely be seek, because as you're seeking, you're in that place of curiosity. When you're in a place of curiosity, you're in a place of growth, whether you realize it or not. That's the foundational place for growth, is just to be curious. It's just begin looking. And so I would say seek for sure. And there's no doubt in my mind, it's definitely seek.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I love that word curiosity, because over the last few years, we've heard about virus and things being contagious. To me, curiosity and seeking, it is contagious, and we need it to be more contagious than it is.
For sure.
And
for sure.
so that's exciting to hear you say that. Folks, you need to get the book Filtering. This is It's been a great conversation, but we just scratched the surface of the book. And so you need to get that, jump down to the notes or wherever you're listening or watching this on, and get a copy of the book and support Joel and all that he's doing, and reach out to him. Listen, we need to be conversing more about some of these topics and others that we talk about here at Seek, Go, Create. So make sure you do that. Also, another big favor, share this episode. If you're on the podcast platforms, you can share it easily there. Take a screenshot or something you can actually share out of the episodes now with clips and things like that. If you're on YouTube watching this, make sure that you share, comment, things like that. That just helps get the message out. This is a message that people need. Because there's a lot of other junk being talked about out there, and we need these type conversations, I believe, to get out there in the world more. So make sure that you do that. Thanks for listening in. We've got new episodes every Monday at Seek, Go, Create. Until next time, continue being all that you were created to be.